In a world where nothing is what it seems. Sometimes, you just need to take a step back and take a second look. Discover the weird, quaint, and downright bizarre. It's time to rethink.
Eye floaters. It's no illusion, but it's almost like seeing things that are not even in front of you. Do you ever get that feeling? Some people would swear seeing them randomly. After the shower, during a sunny day, while driving, what else? Well, they're called eye floaters, and they take on different shapes. Sometimes they can be described as clear blobs, squiggly lines, tentacles, and insectoid creatures. And if you try to follow them with your eyes, they also move along with you. And sometimes they just disappear. So surely there's an explanation for what we are observing. Well, let's take a look at eye floaters. Eye floaters are like mini floating apparitions. In Latin, they are known as muscae volitantes, which means flying flies. The condition of seeing eye floaters is known as myodysopsia. And no, they are not optical illusions. They are actual things that drift in your eyeballs. See, the eye has different parts. At the front of your eye is what's called the cornea, which is like a transparent layer. Behind the cornea is the pupil, or the dark spot in the middle of the eye. And in the pupil is the iris, the colorful ring-like object in your pupils. Between these two is what is known as the aqueous humor, which is a reservoir of liquid. At the back of your eyes is a lining of cells that are sensitive to light, called the retina. There's also another mass of liquid that can be found here, which is called the vitreous humor. The vitreous humor is clear and colorless, and consists mostly of water. And while the aqueous humor gets replenished, the vitreous does not. This means that the vitreous that you were born with is the same one you'll have till you eventually die. It also means that any traces of other cells which are left in the vitreous, like old blood cells and any external objects washed in the vitreous, will stay there. Now these little bits of objects, when cast with light, will produce very tiny shadows that our retinas and brains will pick up as eye floaters. Eye floaters are also caused by the vitreous humor clumping up like small clear gels. Oh no! Objects stuck at the back of your eyes. Don't worry, it's not as uncommon as you think. A study from UK reveals that optometrists expect an average of 14 cases each month. And if it's not affecting your vision, there is no cause to be alarmed. Eye floaters float, so to speak, so they won't be permanently in your vision. So if you see them floating around, close your eyes and just wait for them to disappear. However, if the floaters appear more than usual, this may be a sign of posterior vitreous detachment, or the condition where the vitreous humor separates itself from the retina. Without the vitreous humor, the retina is prone to tearing, which in extreme cases can result to blindness. Still, this kind of condition only appears on older people, and there is a slightly low 14% chance that it may damage the retina. As for treatment, well, there's lasers for eye surgery, but newer research suggests vitrectomy, which is a procedure where the liquids from the vitreous humor are replaced with a liquid saline solution. So the next time you see floaters, well, you are not hallucinating. And there's no microscopic creatures in your eyes. And don't worry if you only experience it once a while. And if it does not affect your ability to see, then these eye floaters are just that. Shadows of small debris behind your eyes. Sword swallowing. Another circus and stage staple is up for today. A sharp-bladed weapon, unsheathed. It's a sword. No, don't go pointing it at people. That thing looks dangerous. I said don't go pointing it at people. That means you too. Okay, he's gonna eat the blade. Oh. And voila! No harm done. Amazing. Today, let's talk about one of the classic acts from circus, stage, and even street shows. Let's talk about the art of sword swallowing. Sword swallowing has a very long and varied history. Perhaps one of the earliest accounts for this type of stunt comes from the ancient Greece and Rome in the 1st century AD. Then sword swallowing appeared again, this time in 8th century China. The act eventually found its way to Japan and was incorporated in the acrobatic theater known as sangaku. It also found its way to Europe, where it became associated with street performance acts, associated with minstrels, and traveling performers. However, in 1893, sword swallowing became featured at the Chicago World's Fair. This in turn put sword swallowing on the map around the world. In the 1900s, the act has become integrated with traveling circuses and sideshows. Sword swallowers even shared equal billing with magic acts of the time. So how is it done anyway? Well, sword swallowing is simply that. Swallowing a long piece of metal, but of course, there are some risks involved. So it goes without saying that you shouldn't try this at home. The secret is in proper form and training. The first thing that aspiring sword swallowers learn is the proper form and posture. Performers must tilt their head back and relax the upper esophageal sphincter, the muscle responsible for the involuntary gag reflex. Once the muscle is relaxed, the sword is slowly swallowed as it passes through the pharynx. The performer's saliva acts as a lubricant for the sword. Once the sword is past the pharynx, the sword will go down easier with the help of good old gravity. As it enters, the esophagus straightens and leads the sword towards the cardiac opening and then to the stomach. Some performers eat a heavy meal before performing, because this helps in orienting the stomach to a more vertical manner. Great care must be taken, of course, when passing the sword past the pharynx, as vital organs and body parts, such as the heart, lungs, and aorta, are only within millimeters of the path of the sword. And we can't stress this enough. Do not try this at home. The risks involved are far too great. So it's best to leave it to the trained professionals. Sword swallowing at the very least causes sore throat because of the constant exposure of the esophagus to external objects. Swallowing many swords over the course of a long time may also contribute to the distension of the esophagus, which means it partially loses the ability to contract and redirect chewed food to the stomach. And finally, there's the risk of damaging vital organs. But did you know that despite the dangers and risks that sword swallowing poses to the human body, it actually helped to contribute to medical research? Scientists study the anatomy and internal functions of the esophagus by observing sword swallowers. This contributed to the development of endoscopy. How? Doctors and scientists worked with sword swallowers by letting them swallow cameras and endoscopic apparatuses. Also, by working with sword swallowers, doctors are able to study the esophagus and the subsequent pathways leading it to vital organs in the body.
Neat!
Contact juggling. Check it out! It's another form of object manipulation and performance, seemingly defying gravity yet again. But this time, it's a bit different. It's like the objects, or in this case the ball, is moving, yet it never leaves the performer's body. It's called contact juggling. Contact juggling is a form of juggling or manipulation of objects, usually balls, that are performed without leaving any contact from the body. Sounds simple? Think again. It's kinda like toss juggling, only it's the opposite. Now let's take a look at a quick history of contact juggling. While the act itself is only a few decades old, there have been juggling tricks that are commonly associated with contact juggling from way back. You could say that these tricks were contact juggling in its early forms. Among them was simply balancing and rolling the ball on parts of the body, like head balancing or rolling the ball from shoulder to shoulder. And then there's palm spinning, where more than one ball is spun around palms. Think of baoding, or Chinese stress balls, and you'll get the idea. These basic tricks were already centuries old, even before contact juggling became a thing. Well, contact juggling came out around the 1980s, with innovations from performers like Tony Duncan, who was able to perform with a ball that rolls all over his body, and Michael Moschen, who pioneered using clear balls in his routine. He used as much as 8 in one routine, and it was considered innovative and groundbreaking at the time. Moschen, of course, received great praises from the international circus community for his revolutionary performance style. In 1986, a film called Labyrinth, which starred David Bowie, featured scenes which showcased contact juggling. Then in 1990, the first book on contact juggling was published by John P. Miller. This would be followed in 1991 by a PBS video special called Michael Moschen in Motion, which further cemented the popularity of contact juggling in the mainstream. Let's look at a couple of types of contact juggling tricks, from the simplest ones to the more complex. Body rolling is the manipulation of one or more props around the hands, arms, and other parts of the body. The most basic body roll is called the butterfly, where the ball is rolled from the palm to the back of the hand via fingertips. Head rolling is the trick where the prop moves around the juggler's head. It also involves balancing the prop over the head. It kinda looks like when football players balance the ball over their heads. Palm spinning, on the other hand, means the manipulation of one or more balls. The balls are usually manipulated in such a way that it produces mesmerizing patterns. One of the more common forms of this trick is the rotating pyramid, formed with rotating balls in one hand. And finally, we have isolation moves. This refers to a type of ball manipulation that appears as if the ball is stuck in place. This technique involves a combination of sleight of hand and some fixed point miming. The clear surface of contact juggling balls also contribute to the illusion because small movements and rotations are barely noticeable, which adds to the effect. Jump cut. Here's something you might have noticed in movies. It's a blink and you miss it type of thing. Exploding objects, teleporting actors, and the transitions from scene to scene. Why, it's as simple as utilizing the editing technique called the jump cut. The jump cut is basically a cut in a continuous footage that is edited to connect with a different set of footage or take. At its most basic, it's just a form of cutting and splicing footage shot from different scenes, or a cut in the continuity of one scene. It's literally an abrupt transition. It gives the effect of jumping through time by literally cutting footage and re-splicing at a further point in the film's timeline. It's so basic anybody can do it. Despite it being dead simple, did you know that the jump cut was actually discovered by accident? Pioneering filmmaker George Méliès is known as the father of the jump cut. He used it for editing as well as for special effects. According to movie legend, Méliès was filming a busy street one day when his camera malfunctioned. It took some time to have it fixed, and when the camera finally got fixed, the traffic was gone. And so, when the footage was played back for viewing, Méliès saw some peculiar things. Like a man transforming into a woman, and an omnibus turning into a hearse. And thus, the trick was discovered and put to use. One of the most common ways that the jump cut is used is for special effects. This is what is called a substitution splice. The effect creates the illusion of objects appearing or disappearing. It can also make objects and actors transform or change from one thing to another. Basically, it can be done by recording then stopping in the middle of the take, and adding and subtracting objects in the scene. Then the camera is set to record again, and the illusion is created. The trick can also be done in the editing stage, where footage and frames are carefully selected to match as close as possible and are then spliced together to create the effect. So, want to try it out? It's pretty simple to do this, and you can even do it with modern cameras or even your phone. Here, take your camera and plan a scene. Make sure you have a camera tripod or something to keep the camera in place. This is crucial for the effect. Now hit record. and have your actor step on screen. Make him do a pose and tell him to hold it for a few seconds. Now hit pause to stop recording. And tell the actor to step out of the scene. And hit record once more, making sure that the camera is still at the same position. Now combine both scenes and voila! You've just made the actor disappear. Now try it doing the reverse. This time start with the empty scene and record for a few seconds. Now hit pause and have someone appear on screen. Now you've just made someone magically appear. For years, this technique has been used to great effect by early filmmakers, especially for films involving magic and fantasy themes. Now it's your turn to get creative. Grab your phones and cameras, and let's get rolling. See what fun scenes you can come up with.
Now, this episode would not be complete without a quick discussion on some notable rethinkers. People who are responsible for giving us these mind-boggling illusions and tricks. Today's featured rethinker is
Georges Méliès. Marie-Georges Jean Méliès was born in 1861 in Paris, France. Since his younger years, young George has shown a particular interest in the arts. Because of this, he eventually studied at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Here, Georges Méliès developed his skills and interests towards stage design and puppetry. In 1884, he continued studies in London. In 1895, Méliès chanced upon a show where the Lumière brothers unveiled the cinematograph, which was one of the first motion picture camera projector. He offered to buy it, but he was turned down. So he went to London and sought out Robert Paul, an inventor who made his own camera projector. Méliès then became one of the first pioneering filmmakers, combining his background in theater and stagecraft with his newfound love of filmmaking. He is considered as one of the fathers of filmmaking and cinema, and is credited with developing most of the practical camera tricks and techniques, like the jump cut, substitution splice, and even double exposure, putting these techniques to good use in the fantasy films that he was known for. Georges Méliès was eventually recognized by the French government for his outstanding contribution to the art of filmmaking. He was presented with a Legion of Honor award, as well as a rent-free apartment, where he would spend the remaining years of his life until 1938.
Well, it's the end of the line for this episode. But don't worry, there will be more. Be sure to tune in next time for more tricks and illusions, as we give you another mind-boggling dose of Rethink.